Thank you. Again, I'd like to hear from our chancellors. Are they in favor of one or the other at this point?
Please feel free to ask them.
I'm asking the chancellors. Whoever would like to go first.
Chancellor White.
This is Chancellor Sandine. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead, Chancellor Sandine.
It's okay. I can defer to Dan and then go next.
Okay, then, Chancellor White.
Well, thanks. I mean, I guess I think you do need to choose. I think there's a couple of choices. The new UA choice and I think Regent Perdue referred to a decentralized choice. I think we've got a challenge currently. Of course, the number one, the very first thing in the accreditation standards is that the CEO report to the board. We don't meet that. We never have. And I think under the new UA model, the CEO would report of an accredited university of an accredited UA would report to the board. And then the other model of a decentralized model, the CEOs of the universities, UAF, UAA, and UAS would report to the board, or could report to the board in a scenario that I think we've not envisioned, or at least not contemplated at this point. I think the challenge that we've got currently with our current situation is that you, the board, are separated from the university, from some information at the universities. I think that's probably a challenge, and the reason that the accreditation standard is that CEOs report to the board, whether it's in Model 3 or Model 2 or some other model. I do think that there are decisions that we're not making now that need to be made because we don't have decision on structure. So I do think the structure needs to be decided. I do think that the 1 versus 3 discussion, the tension between 1 and 3, does create inefficiency, whether we're 1 university or 3. And I think that's a question of oneness versus oneness and sameness versus what is seamless, and whether it's important to be 1 or whether it's important to be 3. And I think about in the state, we still have municipalities. The municipalities still have their administration. We have a state administration. The federal administration in Washington, D.C., we still have states and states administrations. I've done lots of jobs at UAF. I started as a term assistant faculty, as a term faculty. I was a tenured faculty, a department chair, a unit director, a research lead, associate vice chancellor, interim vice chancellor. I've been the vice president and the chancellor. And I think, one of the things that I see is opportunity for entrepreneurism. And I think one thing that sameness does is reduces our ability for entrepreneurialism on our campuses. And I think one example is tuition. UAF is way below our peers in tuition. Our peers are research universities across the country. Our CTC, our community college, is way above, and our research university is way below. So I think that presents a challenge. There's more revenue out there, in my opinion, for UAF, given some flexibility. I personally think that people deserve choice. I want choice. I, as a donor, want choice in what I give to. There are 230,000 people that live in Boise, Idaho. There are 22 separate universities that operate in Boise because people want choice, I think. I also think that competition drives innovation, and it drives companies to get leaner, because if they're competing for, whether it's for students, whether we're competing in Alaska or competing outside of Alaska. UAF's research competitors are University of Washington. We need to be able to compete with them. I think this question of, well, would somebody stop doing something, and is there a risk of the University of Alaska Fairbanks or the University of Alaska Anchorage stopping doing something? There's lots of things we don't do already. There's no law school here. There's no med school. There's no school of architecture. So, I think if there were a decentralized model and the universities were competing with each other, and without outside universities, it would be a market decision. The market would decide that for the number of law students, there isn't a law school here. I think that during strategic pathways, both the Anchorage and Fairbanks communities said we want a school of business and we want a school of engineering. And if there's the market to support those two, then they would both exist. So I do think you need to choose. I do think that there's two models. I think certainly the UA model and a decentralized model that would allow the universities in their current existence to kind of pursue the pathways that they're on. So thank you.
Thank you. Chancellor Sandine?
Yes, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. And I do agree with what Chancellor White has stated. I think he makes some real excellent points. So I won't reiterate those. I'll go in a slightly different direction. So as you know, I have experience as a chancellor in another state, Wisconsin, that went through almost a severe reduction in state funding to its university system. And at that time, according to the institution that I led and with input from faculty, staff, and community members, we decided on a centralization approach. So we took separate universities and we centralized them. And that was the right solution for that place at that time. So I'm not a person who's against centralization. I have deployed that method myself in the past. However, when I look at the options before us and when I look at the speed by which we need to implement reductions, I think option 2 will allow us to do that more quickly. At UAA, we've already implemented at least $3.8 million in reductions since February when the governor first announced his budget, because I knew from my past experience that we were going to get a cut of some size. And there's no time like the present to start making cuts. Some of them you are well aware of. We talked about the Chugiak Eagle River facility, my decision to not renew that lease. We talked about moving hockey from the Sullivan Arena back to campus. We've also reduced at least a minimum of $500,000 in administrative staff positions, probably more, now that people are resigning and we're not filling those positions. In addition, we have eliminated or we gave notice to term faculty in many of our colleges and assigned that teaching load to our tenure and tenure track faculty instead. I've issued a directive to all of our academic units to increase credit hour production per faculty member. So in essence, faculty are teaching more. So we've implemented many, many things already since February. In addition, we have started to have conversations and we have collected data that will help inform program reduction or disestablishment decisions should that become necessary. We've proposed some major criteria. Our academic deans are looking at those along with the provost and cabinet. And as of last week, we brought in shared governance into that conversation. So we are well along the way of being able to make additional reductions very, very quickly. As soon as you give us that direction and you give us the number that we're aiming for, we will work toward it and we can do it very quickly. The question of a major reorganization of the university, that may be valid, but I don't think it will necessarily reap us immediate savings as if you delegate it to the chancellors. Already, the chancellors and provosts had one phone conversation where we talked about coordinating program elimination, so we're not all eliminating the same thing, and that nothing will be available in Alaska. Although, as Dan said, that may occur in some disciplines. So we are working diligently to move toward reductions. And I think that gives us time to analyze a major structural change. And I think it's the quickest path forward to meeting these reductions. The other thing I'd like to point out is President Johnson pointed out that there are some groups of universities, not necessarily systems, that are going for one accreditation. For example, Kent State University is a single university with multi-campuses. But there is a trend in some areas for consolidation, but there's also a trend for decentralization. And I suggest that you take a look at the state of Oregon higher education system. They disestablished their statewide system and went to a separate university structure. So these are major decisions for you to make. And I really hope that you will take advantage of all the information that is available to you in making these decisions. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Chancellor Caulfield?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. Are you able to hear me well enough?
We are, thanks.
Right. Well, first of all, I appreciate the difficult decisions you've had to make during this meeting. I think we're all feeling that. And I share many of the comments that my colleagues have already shared. I do think that a careful look at the second and the third options is warranted. And I would echo what Chancellor Sandeen just said about taking the time that we have available to us to look at perhaps even other models that strike the right balance between consolidation and retaining some level of distributed programs and services. And as I see it, that is the tension that we're facing here, the necessary cost reductions and efficiencies of consolidating and streamlining what we offer across the state. And yet, as we all know, Alaska is a huge state with distinctive regional needs. And I try to wrap my mind around what a single University of Alaska with single colleges across the system will look like, and what the governing structures would look like that would still address the distinctive regional needs across our great state and avoid having all the decisions being made in only one place, or at least not well informed, because it's a process that doesn't have good information about the distinct regional needs across our state. So I think that's one of my foremost concerns is, what is the model that accomplishes the cost reductions and the necessary efficiencies, and yet also has a governance structure that can take the distinctive regional needs at the campus level, at the community, the regional level into account. And I think about a single faculty senate, for example, or a single staff council for all of Alaska. And how do we devise structures to ensure that the distinctive needs of our very large state can be taken into account? So I think, we just, as chancellors working with the president, need to roll our sleeves up and really look closely at this. We all know that we're under great time pressure here, but I think taking the time to strike that right balance, as others have said, this is really a momentous decision that we are looking at, the board will be faced with. And so giving you our best thinking and the best models that we think are important for the board to consider is, what I'm committed to, and I know the others are as well. So I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you very much.